The Chinese government warned that Beijing might place tariffs on $3 billion of U.S. goods such as pork, apples and steel pipes. China also wants to place a 15% tariff on U.S. fresh fruit and wine. Taking a hard line against the U.S., the Chinese government made it clear the penalties were in response to Mr. Trump's tariffs on steel and aluminum imports that he announced earlier this month. He Wang, a trade expert, told the FT, China's overall attitude was that it didn't want a trade war, but now tariffs have been announced. Its purpose is to stop a trade war from continuing. Getty. China's government is set to launch a fight back against U.S. President Donald Trump. Zhang Daoshang, senior vice president of China Minmetals Corp., said that while the state-owned mining group's steel exports to the U.S. are tiny, the impact could come indirectly. He said, China's direct exports to the U.S. are not big, but there will be some impact due to our exports via the United States or indirect exports. China's state-run Global Times said Beijing was only just beginning to look at means to retaliate. We believe it is only part of China's countermeasures, and soybeans and other U.S. farm products will be targeted, the widely read tabloid said in a Saturday editorial. Getty. Chinese President Xi Jinping wants to place a 15% tariff on U.S. fresh fruit and wine. Wei Jianguo, vice chairman of Beijing-based think tank China Center for International Economic Exchanges, told China Daily that Beijing could impose tariffs on more U.S. products, and is considering a second and even third list of targets today. China's Vice Premier Liu He declared the U.S. has flouted trade rules with an inquiry into intellectual property and China will defend its interests. In a phone call with U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, Chinese state media reported, Liu said China still hoped both sides would remain rational and work together to keep trade relations stable. The call between Mnuchin and Liu, a confidant of President Xi Jinping, was the highest-level contact between the two governments since Mr. Trump announced plans for tariffs on up to $60 billion of Chinese goods on Thursday. Getty. The Chinese government made it clear that the penalties were in response to Mr. Trump's tariffs. The deepening rift has sent a chill through financial markets and the corporate world as investors predicted dire consequences for the global economy should trade barriers start going up. Stocks sagged at the start of this month after the tariffs on aluminum and steel were announced, but they quickly recovered as the administration said the tariffs would not be as severe as they first looked. The losses this week were worse, and investors are hoping for hints the sanctions on China are more of a negotiating tactic. In Geneva, officials from the EU, Japan, China, and Russia gathered at the World Trade Organization and criticized the U.S. tariffs. This week, the S&P 500 index dropped 55.43 points, or 2.1%. to 2,588.26. The index skidded 6% this week, its worst since January 2016. The Dow Jones Industrial Average lost 424.69 points, or 1.8%, to 23,533.20. The Nasdaq Composite fell 174.01 points, or 2.4%. to 6,992.67. Banks also took steep losses as interest rates decreased. Lisa Erickson, chief investment officer at U.S. Bank Wealth Management said, there could be a possibility of a bounce back if, as this progresses, both sides look like they're negotiating. There could be further decline if people get a sense there could be more trade restrictions in place. If the tariffs and counter-tariffs reduce economic growth in the U.S., the Fed is likely to raise rates at a slower pace. Getty. Starbucks could be targeted by China's trade war. Alex Wolf, a former U.S. diplomat, who works for Aberdeen Standard Investments, warned that Beijing could retaliate further by targeting U.S. multinationals outside China. He told the FT, Apple, Microsoft, Starbucks and Nike could be in the firing line. Apple's Tim Cook called for calm heads amid the dispute. The sparring has cast a spotlight on hardware makers such as Apple, which assemble the majority of their products in China for export to other countries. Electrical goods and tech are the largest U.S. import item from China.